A 20-year-old driver, a 50G impact into the barriers at Spoon Curve, a speed difference between two cars so extreme that the driver in the faster one had almost no time to react before his race was over and his knee was bruised and the safety car was out. And the entire paddock was asking the same question. How did we get here? And more importantly, is this the new normal? Today, we are breaking down exactly what happened to Oliver Bearman at Suzuka, why this crash is about far more than one driver misjudging a gap, what the 2026 regulations actually do that made this incident almost inevitable, and why the FIA's response after the race should concern every single person who watches this sport. Subscribe to F1 Race Report right now if you follow Formula One every single week. Here is exactly how this went down. Lap 21 of the Japanese Grand Prix. Oliver Bearman, starting from 18th after a difficult qualifying, had made his early pit stop and was working his way back through the field. He was chasing Alpine's Franco Colapinto for 17th place, a fight for a position that would score no championship points, but that is the reality of where Haas and Alpine currently sit in 2026. Approaching Spoon Curve, Bearman was traveling at 308 kilometers per hour. Colapinto was doing almost exactly the same speed he had done on the previous lap. Consistent, predictable, nothing out of the ordinary. The problem was that Bearman was carrying 50 kilometers per hour more than Colapinto. That is not a small margin. That is the kind of speed differential that, in the words of Bearman himself, we have simply never seen in Formula One before. Colapinto moved towards the middle of the track. Bearman had no room and no time. He went onto the grass at over 190 miles per hour, lost all grip on the steering, and hit the barrier at Spoon with an impact recorded at 50G. He limped out of the wreckage. Marshals helped carry him. X-rays at the medical center confirmed a bruised right knee and no fractures. He was lucky. He was very, very lucky. Now, let's talk about why this crash is not just a racing incident, because the speed difference that nearly ended Bearman's race weekend in a hospital rather than a medical center did not come from a mechanical failure or a driver error. It came from the 2026 regulations doing exactly what they were designed to do. The new power unit rules for 2026 mandate a 50-50 split between combustion power and electrical energy during a race. What that means in practice is that cars are constantly managing their deployment, harvesting electrical energy on corner entry and deploying it on exit and down straights. Different teams, different cars, and different strategies on any given lap can produce wildly different speeds at the same point on the circuit. Haas was deploying more electrical energy than Alpine through that section. That is why Bearman was 50 kilometers per hour faster. That is why the gap disappeared before he could do anything about it. The FIA acknowledged this directly after the race. Their statement confirmed that the high closing speeds of the 2026 cars were a contributing factor in the incident. That is an admission from the sport's governing body that their own regulations created the conditions for a 50G crash. You don't often see that level of honesty from the FIA after a race weekend. It tells you how serious this is. Haas team principal Ayao Komatsu cleared Colapinto of any blame immediately and without hesitation. His explanation was precise. Colapinto was doing exactly what he had done on the lap before. The problem was that his Haas was deploying 20 kilometers per hour more than the Alpine through that section, even on normal laps. The delta on that specific lap happened to be catastrophic. Here's the part of this story that deserves far more attention than it is currently getting. Because what happened at Suzuka was not a shock to the people inside the paddock. It was the moment the rest of us caught up. Drivers had already been warning the FIA about these closing speed differentials before Japan. The 2026 regulations were new, the data was still coming in, and Haas boss Komatsu had said publicly after the Chinese Grand Prix that the sport needed at least 5 race weekends of data before making any judgments on regulation changes. 3 races later, Bearman hit the wall at 50G, and suddenly waiting for 5 weekends of data felt like a very difficult position to defend. Landis Norris and Max Verstappen had both spoken publicly after Japan about the power unit's influence on the racing. The closing speed problem is not a fringe concern raised by one team. It's a structural feature of how these cars manage energy, and it will show up again. not necessarily in a crash of this magnitude, but in overtaking attempts that are impossible to judge and racing situations that punish drivers for doing nothing wrong. The FIA responded by announcing meetings with teams, power unit manufacturers, drivers, and FOM to assess the regulations. The 2026 rules were always going to include a structured review after the opening phase of the season. Bearman's crash accelerated that timeline. The question now is whether the review leads to meaningful parameter changes before Miami, or whether the sport continues to gather data while its drivers navigate situations nobody has encountered before. There's one more layer to this story that connects directly to the controversy surrounding the FIA's recent approach to the sport. Oliver Bearman arrives at the Miami Grand Prix sitting on 10 penalty points. 12 triggers an automatic race ban with no appeals process and no wiggle room. Those 10 points were accumulated across 5 race weekends in 2025: Monaco, Silverstone, Monza, Sao Paulo, and Abu Dhabi. 2 of those points expire on May 23rd, 4 more expire on July 5th. But between now and May 23rd, Bearman is 2 points from a missed race. 2, in a sport where the FIA has now acknowledged that their own regulations are generating situations that even an experienced driver couldn't have navigated cleanly. The good news for Bearman is that the FIA changed their penalty point guidelines for 2026 specifically because drivers and teams made the case that points were being given out disproportionately. Under the new guidelines, stewards will only award penalty points for incidents that are dangerous, reckless, or deliberately result in a collision. Not a single penalty point was handed out across the opening 3 rounds of the 2026 season. But the fact that one of the most exciting young talents in the sport, a driver who finished 7th in Australia and 5th in China, and is part of a Haas team that currently sits 4th in the Constructors' Championship, is 2 points from a ban heading into his first sprint weekend of the year, is a tension that does not go away quietly. What Miami now looks like is a sprint weekend at a circuit where the 2026 energy management regulations will demand precise deployment decisions, with a driver sitting 2 points from a race ban. A governing body that has publicly admitted its own rules caused the biggest crash of the season, and a conversation that is far from finished about whether the sport has moved quickly enough to protect the people inside the cars. Bearman will be fully fit. His team is 4th in the standings. He has shown genuine pace across the opening 3 races. None of that changes the fact that the fastest car through any given corner at Suzuka this year was not the car with the best driver. It was the car that was deploying energy at the right moment. That is the version of Formula One that Miami is going to show us in 3 weeks. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think the FIA needs to act on the 2026 closing speed problem before Miami, or should they wait for more data? And is Bearman's penalty point situation being taken seriously enough given what the sport just saw at Suzuka? Subscribe to F1 Race Report for this conversation every single week. Like the video, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you at Miami.